Before I can say hi in the comments, let me tell you where you're from. No, wait, before I tell you what happened, I need you to understand something about the kind of family my wife came from. They had a house in Savannah with a name, not a street address. A name, like it was a person, like it had feelings that needed protecting. I found that out on our third date, when she mentioned Ashford, the way other people mention their childhood home. Casually, like everyone's house had a brass nameplate at the gate and a gardener named Mr. Beaumont who'd been there since her grandfather's time. I grew up in Akron. We had a house too. We called it the house. Her name was Vivienne. Viv, when she was relaxed, which, around her family, wasn't often. I was 31 when we got married. She was 29. I designed mid-scale commercial interiors for a firm in Charleston. Nothing glamorous, but I was good at it and I liked the work. I liked turning empty, ugly spaces into places where people wanted to stay. Viv thought that was charming when we were dating. Her mother, Cecily, thought it was a conversation topic she could endure for approximately 4 minutes before redirecting to something more appropriate. Her father, Harmon, was the kind of man who never asked what you did for a living because he didn't consider it relevant. What he cared about was who you were, meaning who your family was, what institutions had shaped you, what rooms you'd sat in that he might have sat in too. I had sat in approximately none of those rooms. He was always pleasant to me, in the way a hotel concierge is pleasant to someone who booked the wrong tier of room. Helpful enough, not rude, but never quite warm. Viv's brother, Sterling, was 34 and worked in what their family called asset management, and what I understood to be a firm that moved their family's money around in ways that kept it from leaving the family. He was tall, handsome in a catalog way, and he had the habit of asking questions he already knew the answers to. He asked me once, at Christmas, whether I'd ever thought about transitioning into something with more growth potential. I told him I liked what I did. He nodded slowly, the way people nod when they're deciding not to argue. Viv and I had been together 4 years before we got married, and in those 4 years I learned the rhythm of how I fit into her family's life. I was present at major holidays. I was seated at the adult table, but toward the far end, near whoever else had married into the family and was still, metaphorically speaking, on probation. I was referred to in photos as Viv's husband rather than by name, even by people who'd met me dozens of times. I told myself this was just how old Southern families were. I told myself Viv loved me and that was the only thing that mattered. She did love me. I believe that. I still believe it, actually. I just think love, for her, existed in a separate room from loyalty, and I didn't fully understand that until a Tuesday in April. We'd been married 2 years. She came downstairs with a small weekend bag and told me she was going to her parents' for the weekend. Her mother had organized a small family gathering, she said. Nothing elaborate, just a chance for everyone to catch up since the holidays had been chaotic and they hadn't all been together properly since Thanksgiving. She'd be back Sunday evening. "Do you want me to come?" I asked. I was making coffee. I remember looking at the coffee maker instead of her. She hesitated, not long, maybe 2 seconds. "But I notice it the way you notice a skip in a song you've heard 100 times. It's going to be really low-key," she said. "Just the family doing family stuff. You'd be bored?" I turned around. She was checking her phone. "I'm never bored," I said. "I like people." She smiled, but it was the smile she used when she wanted a conversation to end pleasantly. "I'll be back Sunday. We can go to that new place on King Street." I let it go. I'd learned to let a lot of things go. She kissed me, picked up her bag, and left. I stood in the kitchen with my coffee in the particular quiet that settles in a house when a person you love has just walked out of it. The weekend passed. Saturday I worked. Sunday I cleaned out the hall closet, which I'd been meaning to do for 3 months. I found a box of old photos from our first year together, back when everything was still new and unguarded, and I sat on the floor for a while just looking at them. Around 4 in the afternoon, I got a text from a guy I'd gone to graduate school with, someone I hadn't heard from in over a year. He'd moved to Savannah for work. He sent me a link. The link was a public Instagram post from someone named Ashford 9th Style, an account I'd never seen before. The bio said, "Celebrating the beauty of Savannah living," and the feed was what you'd expect. Garden parties, historic architecture, linen tablecloths, magnolia arrangements. The kind of account people make to document a life that's being curated. The post my friend sent me was from the night before, Saturday evening. It was a photo of a long table set outdoors under Edison lights, surrounded by maybe 20 people in formal attire. Crystal glasses, centerpieces, the whole thing. The caption read, "An evening to celebrate the Ashford family's newest chapter, Sterling's engagement to Brooke. We couldn't be more proud." And Sterling was engaged. I stared at the photo for a long time. I made myself look at it carefully. I recognized Cecily immediately, in a pale gold dress, laughing at something. I recognized Harmon standing at the head of the table, holding his glass up like he was born for exactly this moment, which he probably believed he was. I saw Sterling, grinning, with a woman I'd never met standing beside him. And there was Viv, in a floor-length navy gown, her hair done properly, earrings I hadn't seen before. She was mid-laugh at something, leaning slightly toward her mother, her hand on the table in front of a full champagne flute. She looked happy. She looked completely, genuinely happy. I set my phone down on the kitchen counter and I stood there for a moment. Then I picked it up and looked at the photo again, just to make sure I was reading it correctly. I was reading it correctly. My wife was at her brother's engagement dinner. A formal, planned event. An event with a photographer, apparently, and Edison lights, and 20-something guests in black tie. Not a low-key family catch-up. Not boring. Not something I would have been too bored to attend. I had not been invited. I want to be precise here, because precision matters. I wasn't absent from the photo because I declined to come. I wasn't absent because I'd had other plans. I wasn't absent by my own choice in any form. I had been told the event didn't exist. I had been told there was nothing to attend. I had been kept out of this deliberately, and the effort required to do that, the planning, the lie, the assumption that I either wouldn't find out or would accept whatever explanation came after, the effort told me something I'd been avoiding knowing for 2 years. I was not family. I was not even close to family. I was an inconvenience that Viv managed carefully, keeping me away from the parts of her real life that her family considered important. I didn't call her. I thought about it. I picked up the phone twice, but I put it down both times, because I realized I didn't want to have that conversation while she was still in that house, surrounded by those people, in that gown. I didn't want her to defend herself from a table at Ashford while the Edison lights were still strung overhead. I wanted to see her face. So I waited. She came home Sunday around 6:30. She came in through the side door the way she always did, set her bag down in the hall, called out, "I'm back." The way people do when they've been away and the house feels strange. I was sitting in the living room. I had a book open on my lap that I hadn't been reading. She came in and looked at me, and for just a second, one beat, something crossed her face. She recovered fast, but I saw it. "How was it?" I asked. "Good," she said. She sat down in the chair across from me. Really low-key. We mostly just talked. My mom made that lemon cake. She held my gaze. She was good at this. She had been doing it for, I now understood, quite a while. "How was your weekend?" she asked. "Interesting," I said. "I heard about Sterling." The room changed. Not dramatically. She didn't stand up, didn't raise her voice. Her face just reconfigured. The ease left it. "Who told you?" she asked. "Now what do you mean? Not what about Sterling?" Just who told you? That was the confirmation I'd already had, but still somehow needed. "Doesn't matter," I said. "Sterling and Brooke." "That's her name?" Viv looked at her hands. "Yes." "Looks like a beautiful event," I said. I saw the photos. She didn't say anything for a moment. The lemon cake detail sat between us on the coffee table like something neither of us wanted to touch. "I need you to explain it to me," I said. "Not the why. I think I understand the why. But I want to hear you say it." She exhaled slowly. "My family," she started. "Your family," I said. "Yes. They have a specific." She stopped. Started again. "Sterling's engagement was important to them. Brooke's family is very established in Savannah, the Wheatons. They've known each other for decades. My parents wanted it to be uncomplicated," I said. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wet, which I hadn't expected. And for a second I felt something I didn't want to feel. Something soft and familiar. And I had to work to hold on to what I was actually sitting with. I didn't want to fight about it, she said. So you lied. I didn't. She stopped. I didn't tell you the full truth. You told me it was a low-key family catch-up. I said that I'd be bored. You had a floor-length gown in your bag, Viv. She pressed her lips together. I want to ask you something, I said, and I want you to actually think about it before you answer. In 2 years of marriage, how many times have you been at a family event that I didn't know about? The pause before she answered was long enough to be its own answer. A few, she said. A few. They have. She pressed her hands together in her lap. There are things they do where they feel it would be, where they feel I don't belong. She didn't deny it. And you agreed with them, I said. Every time. You decided their comfort was worth more than the truth. I was trying to keep the peace, she said. Between all of you. I was in the middle. You weren't in the middle, I said. And I said it quietly because I meant it exactly. You were on one side. You've always been on one side. I just didn't want to see it. She started to cry then, not dramatically, just the kind of quiet, contained crying that happens when there's nothing left to say. And I sat there and watched it happen, and felt the strange, specific grief of loving someone and understanding, at the same time, that you've been wrong about what you had. I didn't sleep in the bedroom that night. I took the spare room. She didn't try to stop me. In the morning, I went to work. I sat at my desk and looked at my current project, a restaurant renovation in Mount Pleasant, a space I'd been trying to open up for weeks. And I thought about her, about us, about the way I'd been explaining away their coldness for 2 years, reframing their exclusion as cultural difference, their deliberate absences as just the way certain families operated. I thought about the engagement party, about the table set under those lights, about the fact that somewhere in the planning of that evening, the guest list, the seating, the call to the photographer, someone had specifically confirmed that I would not be there, that the evening would be cleaner without me, that my wife had received that confirmation and said nothing. I have a LinkedIn profile, nothing special. My work, a few projects I'm proud of, connections from school and firms I've moved through over the years. I don't post much. But that afternoon, I wrote something. It wasn't long. I didn't name anyone. I didn't describe the dinner or the gown or the Instagram photos. I wrote about what it's like to spend years in a marriage where your existence is inconvenient to your spouse's family, and how you learn to make peace with it because you love the person and you convince yourself that love is enough. I wrote about the specific kind of invisible you can be in a room full of people who know you're there and choose not to see you. And I wrote about the moment you understand clearly that being kept out wasn't an accident or an oversight or a cultural habit. It was a choice that required effort and coordination and someone who knew you well enough to deceive you. I wrote it for me. I didn't think much about who would read it. By the following evening, it had 400 and some interactions, then more. A few people I didn't know had shared it. A couple I did know. And then, apparently, someone in Savannah's design community, a small interconnected world where everyone knows the old families, had shared it within circles that overlapped significantly with the Ashfords. Viv called me at 8:43 that night. My mother called me, she said. People are asking her about it. I didn't name anyone, I said. You didn't have to, she said. People know. Then people know, I said. There was silence on the line. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store, which is not how I'd imagined this part of my life going, but here we were. You wanted them to see it, she said. It wasn't an accusation, exactly. It was closer to recognition. I wanted to say something true, I said. That's all. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, what do we do now? And I sat with that question for a while, because it deserved to be sat with. We were two people who had, in different ways, made choices that brought us to this parking lot, to this particular silence. She had chosen her family's comfort over my place in her life, repeatedly, over years. I had chosen to believe it wasn't happening. We had both been wrong, and the wrongs were different in kind, but they were both real. I don't know yet, I said. I think we need to be honest with each other for a while before we decide anything else. She said okay. She sounded tired. I was tired too. I drove home. The house was quiet. Viv was in the kitchen, still in her work clothes, and she looked at me when I came in the way people look at someone they've hurt and know they've hurt, and don't know how to come back from hurting. I stood in the doorway for a second, and then I went and sat at the kitchen table, and she made 2 cups of tea without being asked, which was something she'd always done, and she sat down across from me and we talked. Not about everything. Not that night. But we actually talked, for the first time in maybe a year. What came out of it over the next few weeks was a version of the truth we'd both been avoiding. Her family had never made peace with our marriage. They'd been civil because Viv had asked them to be, but they had been quietly, persistently clear about what they thought of her choice. She had been managing that, absorbing their disapproval, redirecting it, trying to contain it for the entire time we'd been married. And somewhere in that effort to manage them, she'd stopped managing us. She'd started making small decisions, then larger ones, that prioritized keeping things smooth with them over keeping things honest with me. She knew it was wrong. She'd known it for a while. She just hadn't known what to do about it. Whether we made it through that part I'm still living, it's not a clean story. It doesn't end with a courthouse step or a mountain summit or a clean line where the old life stops and the new one begins. It's more complicated than that. And I think anyone who's been in a marriage knows that the complicated version is the real one. But here's what I know. I stopped shrinking to fit into a space that was never built for me. I stopped giving my silence to people who counted on it, and I learned, in a way I couldn't have learned any other way, that the most dangerous lies are the ones told by people who love you, not to hurt you, but because they can't figure out how to love you and tell the truth at the same time. If you're somewhere in this story, if you recognize something in it, leave it in the comments. I read them. I want to know where you're listening from. And if there's someone in your life who makes you feel like an asterisk in your own relationship, I hope something in this reaches you. Thanks for being here. There's a version of the story where I stay quiet, where I see the photo, feel the thing I felt, and then fold it up and put it somewhere in the back of my chest with all the other things I'd already decided not to say. I almost did that. I sat with my phone in that quiet house for a long time and thought about the cost of saying nothing versus the cost of saying something, and honestly, the silence felt safer. Silence usually does, right up until it doesn't. What changed my mind wasn't anger. I want to be clear about that, because I think people expect a story like this to be driven by rage, some need to burn something down, get even, make someone pay. That wasn't it. What I felt, sitting at my kitchen counter with a picture of my wife in a navy gown at a party I didn't know existed, was something quieter and more clarifying. It was the feeling of finally understanding something I'd been refusing to understand for 2 years. And once you understand something that clearly, you can't really unsee it. The thing about being excluded the way I was excluded is that it requires people to work at it. Nobody ends up accidentally left off a guest list for a formal event with a photographer and 20 guests in formal wear. Somebody looked at a list and said no, maybe more than once, and someone else. Someone who shared a bed with me and knew my coffee order and kissed me goodbye with a bag that had a floor-length gown tucked inside it, said okay, every time. That's the part I kept coming back to, not Cecily's coldness or Harmon's polite indifference or Sterling's catalog handsome condescension. Those I'd made my peace with years ago. What I hadn't made my peace with was Viv. What I hadn't let myself fully reckon with was that the person I'd chosen, the person I'd built a life with, had been choosing something else over and over, in small quiet ways, and I had been giving her my silence as cover. Actions have weight. That's not a complicated idea. But it's one I think we resist because we love people, and we want their intentions to matter more than their choices. Viv's intention was never to hurt me. I believe that, but her choices, each small accommodation to her family's comfort, each omission, each packed bag, those accumulated into something real, into a shape I could finally see from the outside. And my silence had accumulated too. My willingness to absorb, explain away, and move on had told everyone involved, including me, that the situation was acceptable. It wasn't. What I wrote on LinkedIn wasn't revenge. It was the end of a silence I should have ended earlier. It was me saying to myself more than anyone, I was here. I existed in this marriage. My place in it was real, and the fact that certain people found that inconvenient does not make it less real. That's what I want to leave you with. Not some lesson about in-laws or class differences or family loyalty, because those are real and complicated and don't resolve neatly. What I want you to take is this. The things you let slide because it's easier. The truths you don't say because the moment doesn't feel right. The space you keep shrinking to fit into. They add up. They tell people what you're willing to accept. And at some point, accepting the wrong things costs you more than speaking up ever would have. I'm still figuring out what comes next. Viv and I are still in it. Still talking. Still working through something that doesn't have a clean ending yet. But I know that whatever happens, I'm not going back to being quiet about the things that matter. That part of the story is done.